Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to today's webinar. And the series is called China, Let's Talk Business. And my name is Ting Zhang. So what I would like to do today is this very light and short but helpful webinar in terms of takeaway for your business. So I would like to first a little bit about crayfish.io. So we are a digital platform with a range of business services that help you to do cross-border trade with a focus on China. And we have various ways to help through a web-based digital marketplace, but also a number of services with pre-scoped fixed prices. And some of you are very familiar with what we do, but if you have any questions, you can get in touch with us afterwards. So in terms of today's webinar, I would like to start with some China fresh Q1 data. Then we look at some insights from my discussion and working with other clients and Chinese investors, as well as sector specialists. And but today, people come from various sectors, including education, edutech, retail, and also professional services and media, as well as like biotech and pharmaceutical. So I try to be general in terms of the trends and where China is going and the trade, etc. But do ask if you have any specific question about your sector. And if I know, I will give you an answer. If not, I will try to get your answer afterwards. So also, thanks for those of you who have already submitted questions beforehand. I will answer them while I talk. Some of them will be in the points I'm making, and otherwise some of them I will mention in a Q&A. And if you have a question or some of my talks is triggered a question from you, do ask by either putting in the Q&A chat or send to us afterwards. So let's start looking at the data. So this is really, the data just came out 2 days ago. So I hope that would give you some indication of the Chinese economy, but also in terms of the trade. So in general, there's a massive increase compared from last year. Bear in mind, the growth rate is really exaggerated because last year the trade level in March and April was Q1 last year was very much depressed because of the COVID, and you may remember that time there was a massive supply chain problem and international trade just ground to a halt. So this year all this increase is based on that decrease of last year. But in general, you can still see that import and export has come back, and that is the most important, is it has come back for China. And then if you look at by region, it's not surprising that Asia and Europe was still, the top trade partners. You'll be surprised the US is still, despite all this US-China trade war and all what's going on, still one of the top one. But ASEAN, of course, it has a lot more potential to increase that with China, with recent regional agreements signed, RCEP, and then China is also going to join the CPTPP, etc., etc. And then specifically, because of the economy bounce back and manufacturing is also increasing, China has also experienced a lot of increase in commodity imports. I know that one of the attendees today is coming from the sector where they are trading ore, iron ore. So these are at the moment all increased as well, including agriculture and across the level. So now just want to touch upon the consumers, because some of our attendees today are from retail sector. So if you look at on the left, China has overcome, has overtook US to become the largest manufacturer of the world. That was like 10 years ago. But now if you look at the retail, that gap is closing. And China is on a way to become the world's largest consumer market in less than 5 years' time. And that's within the current China's 5-year plan, which we will talk about a bit later as well. And then if you look at the right-hand side, this is really about China's household consumption. In this one, it's interesting that China is way behind the US. So basically, this is what's saying is the Chinese household are saving more money than they're spending compared to the US. In general, for example, in China, 1/3 of the Chinese household owns a car, while in the UK, it's about 2/3. And in the US, it's almost 90, I think it's over 90%. So there's a lot of room for Chinese consumption to grow on a household basis. And the government is trying so hard to stimulate that by encouraging people to basically spend more and save less. So here, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Chinese 14th 5-year plan. As you know, if you don't know, now you know, China is very much adopting a top-down approach. So the government says, this is what we aim to do this next 5 years. And typically China will be able to, reach some of those goals. Probably not all of them, but typically they're quite good at meeting the targets. So, and China has been doing that for the last, 20 something years to do this every 5 years. There's a blueprint, and that's cascaded down from the central government, from the ministries to the province, city, town and village, and then from the big companies, small companies. So this is very important if you look into the business in China to understand where the country is going and what it aspires to achieve. So this next 5 years, instead of setting up a target for GDP, which China used to do, it's now actually do not look at, it doesn't value that GDP figure so high. Instead, it wants high growth, high quality growth and sustainability, and continuously to improve its the environment in terms of a business, but also environment for the living. And very importantly, it's innovation. It's at the core of the Chinese economic development in the next 5 years, and digitization. And I think one of the questions I received from you is, will China be pivoted to B2B? Digital, yes, absolutely. China is looking at massively upgrading its manufacturing facilities and digitize the industrial facilities and the whole manufacturing process. And of course, the consumer market is already very digital driven, but as a general, the economy, based on the China's 5G infrastructure and the sort of new digital infrastructure, the economy is heading a digital way and continuously doing that. So the plan is very ambitious, and Chinese government is very confident that it will be able to reach some of those goals. And of course, in this, we did not mention that the climate change is way on top of the government agenda. And that's also one of the areas the West and China can collaborate despite all the geopolitical difficulties. So this 14th 5-year plan marks a fundamental shift for China to move its economic trajectory to where it can draw on its domestic sources to sustain its growth. Instead of previous years, it's very much based on foreign investment and export. And so just also on this to touch upon China is talking about the two circulation as part of this 14th five-year plan, which was reviewed in the two sessions. So China is looking at domestic circulation, so stimulating the demand and focusing on innovation, but also external circulation, where it's talking about pursuing more international trade. So which is what we are now talking about in today's context. So how, as a UK or Western business, can capitalize on China's recovery? I came up with a PPE answer. So hear me out. What do you mean by PPE? So the first P is plan. So this is where you really need to think. Okay. China is the only place at the moment in the world that's growing. So I need to be in China. What do I do? So maybe can start with some market research, understand the competitors in many sectors, particularly in education and edutech, particularly. You think you have a very good product that helps, English learning or teaching the class or after school tutoring. But in China, there's hundreds of thousands of companies doing that. So you need to understand the domestic competition. What is your USP? How you going to get there? Most importantly, to think about what kind of partners you need to work with and go about identifying them. So that's sort of plan part. And then you need to be prepared. So when I say prepare, I mean you actually have to work out a roadmap to say, okay, to get there, we need to protect our IP. Oh, we need to think about our trademark. There's many cases we've seen clients not bother with trademarks in China, and then later found out the potential competitors or potential partners actually use their trademark registered. And in China, that's the bad news, because in China it's first to file, not first to use. So unless you can really prove the other party maliciously register your trademark, it's very difficult to invalidate that. And then you may end up, a name you do not want. But for those who doesn't think about having a Chinese name for your company or a trademark, that's also something to think about, because some of the cases I look at the client's name, it's actually not easy to pronounce, particularly for Chinese consumers or customers to pronounce English name. If they don't have a Chinese name for your company, if you don't have one, they will come up with a nickname, in which case you may not know until it's too late, and that's also not good. So prepare, think about that, what you need to do. And if your business is very much based on your website, digital delivery, then you need to think about how you're going to get that across the Chinese audience in a way that's easier for them, and that is basically localized into Chinese language, and not just language, but look at the cultural savvy. How do you turn certain, there's buttons that the Chinese consumer needs to be pressed in order to feel that they understand you. And so these are the things that you need to also prepare in terms of like submitting your website URL to Chinese, for example, search engine rather than the English ones, because in China, Google still not be able to use. Things like that you need to consider. And so this is PP, and then what's the E? So this engage. So this one is really, to start, implement your plan. And it's difficult because now we can't travel to China to engage with people face to face, which is really important doing business, trying to build that trust. However, you can still engage digitally to start with, but also you can utilize people on the ground to do some work for you. So it depends on, if you're already in China, then you should look at engage them to expand. So this E can be expand. But if you're not in China, think about how you can start engaging. I know one of the questions I received is is digital virtual the trade mission is the way to go at the moment? Yes, the answer is that's the best, so far you can do. But at least you get to, to see people on the screen, to talk to them. But the next step is really plan to have on the ground resources if you are not able to get there, to go through the quarantine and everything else. So hire local representative could be one, but also look at social media. Think about social media to use, make some noise, use Douyin, the equivalent of TikTok. It's massive in China, B2B marketing, not just consumers. And of course, if you're interested in knowing about those digital marketing, then we do have a next week webinar on that. So I think if you can really, do this PPE, then you will get that. The Chinese market is very worthwhile, and the rewards are good for those who dare and those who basically go through the process to do it properly. So that's, I think, the end of my talk. But very quickly, just to say, if you need help, you don't have to, spend a lot of money on those basic resources and services. Crayfish has got them pre-scoped for you, and you can spend £29 to submit URL, 5 of them, to the Chinese search engine. That is really nothing, but then you will be able to search by other people. And then there's other ways to give your name, find, arranging meetings online, etc. So I know we will have lots of free resources for you, such as, if you're in education, we do have a blog on that. And we have social media, e-commerce, and this is just example. We did have also biotech webinars, things like that as well. So I will stop on this one, and I would now take questions. If any of you have questions, do please send it through the chat, and then we can address your questions. And while you are getting ready for your questions, I can maybe talk through a few of the questions that I've received. So some of them is to say, how would the trade between UK and China change post-COVID in general, and specifically in healthcare? So as I've alluded to in the data and the talk, the trade will still carry on grow, but the momentum would not be that high because of the travel restriction, and also because at the moment I think the UK government is focusing on getting free trade deal with US. So once that's done, then China would be the next one to pursue. So I think if you're looking at massive China UK sort of trade growth, this may be later this year or next year. In healthcare in general, it's a very hot areas for the UK, China, particularly because of COVID and the opportunities that create for the healthcare in both countries. But also in that there's a lot of capital available in China. Most of the, Cambridge, but not also but also the UK biotech companies have absorbed some Chinese investment, although you do not always read about them in the headlines because they may not, for any of some reasons, like to broadcast that. But Chinese investment is very much increasing in the healthcare sector in the UK. So another question is about opportunities for SMEs who are thinking to enter into the K-12 sector. So this one, I think I mentioned, it's very competitive in China in K-12, in education, edutech sector, but it is also a big market. It's really important just to understand the sector better and find the potential partners, and then start from pilot projects, for example, in a small, in a city, and or even in an industrial zone. For example, one of our clients has a pilot project in Suzhou industrial zone. If you think about an industrial zone, you think probably a few schools. Actually, they've got nearly 100 schools. It's a massive industrial zone. So you can actually start with pilot projects small and expand from there. And this is the same with other industry, other sectors. You don't always think about China as a one market because it's too big for you. If you're small, it's much better if you're focused in the pocket, whether it's a city, whether it's a region or province. So that would be one of my advice. And then there's another question about how do we expand our customer base in China? And so this one, I think you've already selling to China. So you already have a good start. So utilize those success case studies and then engage your distributors and incentivize them and incentivize your customer to spread the word for you. And that would be one way. And also, depending on your existing geographic coverage, you may want to point additional distributors, for example, in northern China, southern China, Western China. In China, it's very difficult for a company to cover the whole China unless they have a big national, sort of office and support network. So you should consider to have various different distributors cover various parts of China rather than give exclusivity. So I think there's another question which comes really last minute about sort of international media co-production, whether this will be enhanced or diminished post COVID-19. I must say that I'm not expert on sort of media, but I had worked with clients in games, computer games before, and there's a lot of demand for such content, even for media. So I think there's a lot of collaboration. If you look at a recent Hollywood, and make movies with Chinese stars, and doing a lot of films in China, the financial rewards is very good. So I think despite all this geopolitics bats and on the top level, the difficulties at the business level, we still see optimism and we still see activities going on. So I've got another question coming. It's Garrett. Hi, Garrett. Thanks for your question. What advice do you have for organizations regarding allaying fears of shareholders regarding engaging with potential projects in China? Okay, so this one you are talking about the shareholders' fears. I guess the fears either would be IP side, or it could be political side of things. So I think you need to communicate with your shareholders what they are looking for from the business, right? And if they're really looking for revenue and financial performance, then China probably makes sense for your industry to be there. I think if there are, other markets that's better for you to pursue, and you can afford to, not to look at China, then you might think, the fears justify your approach. But at the end of the day, businesses are there to provide the best returns for the investors and for shareholders. So I guess that's it's conflict. So I hope I have answered you, but I think help your shareholders understand what's going on in the Chinese market, and also understand, to see through those misunderstandings at the moment, between the West and China. I was just before this webinar talking to one of the advocates between UK and China. He's in a House of Lords, and his comments was really about the misunderstanding between the West and China. How do you actually go about to help those, overcome those? Because China just cannot see what the West sees, and the West cannot see what China sees, because it's a totally different mentality and coming from totally different angle, and it's a different culture, different background, and it's very difficult to say who is right, who is wrong, because it depends on which side you are and which angle you're looking at. So it's, to reach a common ground is probably looking at from each other perspective, and that would be the same, not just for business, but for, in general, between countries, between human, relations. Next week, we have Zhao, my colleague, talk about B2B digital marketing. And this is a very good session. I really encourage you to come, even though you think you're not at the moment doing that, to understand in China, in the B2B, what can you do? Because as I mentioned, China is all about digital nowadays. If you want to break into China, what are the main channels, and what are the differences that, here you use Google, in China you use Baidu, here you use LinkedIn in China, you don't use LinkedIn, you use WeChat and Weibo, etc. And so come and also bring your questions. That is what we would like to help you, is to actually answer your questions as well. And then after that, the last week of April, we have a IP session. So this will be delivered by one of our IP service providers. We have services on our website to help you register your trademark or going through IP clinic. So Luna is going to join us next week to talk about, how can you protect your IP in practice. That is also very important for you, whether you're in education or whether you are in biotech. Talking about biotech and pharmaceutical companies, I would just like to mention that, for example, the government regulation is actually very important for those of you who are in this sector, because the Chinese government has recently, for example, has narrowed down the list of foreign brands that's allowed for the hospital from like 140 to about under 40. It's a big change, so make it much more difficult for foreign companies to actually sell into market, unless you have a manufacturing facilities there, or you can outsource manufacturing in China so that it's seen as China made. So those are the things that you need to be aware if you are in particular sectors.